Emma had always been the quiet one in every room, the shy nursing student who sat in the back row, who spoke softly but listened deeply, who carried more compassion in her small hands than most people carried in their entire hearts. That winter evening, snow fell in fragile silence over the city as she hurried toward the hospital for her clinical shift, clutching her worn notebook against her chest. She was already late. One more absence and she could fail the semester. Her scholarship, her only lifeline, hung by a thread. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air as she turned into a narrow alley to take a shortcut, heels crunching against ice. That's when she saw him. An elderly man slumped against a brick wall, blood trickling from a deep cut on his forehead, snow gathering on his silver hair. For a split second, fear froze her. What if it was dangerous? What if someone attacked him? What if she got in trouble for being late? But then he shifted slightly and let out a weak groan. And in that moment, Emma wasn't a student worried about attendance. She was a nurse. She rushed to him, dropping her bag into the snow, her trembling fingers already reaching for gauze. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. His pulse was faint but present. The wound needed pressure. She pressed clean gauze to his forehead, her hands firm yet gentle, speaking softly to keep him conscious. Minutes passed. Then more. Her phone buzzed, 3 missed calls from the hospital. She ignored them. Instead, she took off her own scarf and wrapped it carefully around his head to secure the bandage. She called an ambulance and stayed kneeling in the freezing cold, her knees soaked through, until help arrived. When the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher, one of them asked, "Are you family?" Emma shook her head. No. Just someone who didn't want him to be alone. By the time she reached the hospital, her clinical shift was over. Her supervisor didn't want explanations. "You were irresponsible," he said sharply. "This program requires commitment." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to explain. She wanted to defend herself. But the words felt small compared to what she'd done. That night, she cried quietly in her tiny apartment, wondering if kindness had just cost her everything. The next morning, she walked into campus expecting paperwork, maybe even suspension. Instead, the dean himself was waiting outside her classroom. Students stared. Her heart pounded. "Emma Collins," he asked. She nodded, bracing for impact. But his stern expression softened. "You're needed in the administration office." Confusion swirled inside her as she followed him down the hallway. When the office doors opened, she froze. Sitting there, alive and upright, a clean white bandage wrapped neatly around his forehead, was the man from the alley. Except he wasn't dressed in worn clothes anymore. He wore a tailored suit. Beside him stood several sharply dressed executives. The room radiated quiet power. He looked at her with recognition, and something deeper. Gratitude. "Miss Collins," he said, his voice steady now, "I believe I owe you my life." She stood speechless. The dean cleared his throat nervously. "Emma, this is Mr. Harrison Blake." The name hit the room like thunder. Harrison Blake, the billionaire CEO whose healthcare corporation funded half the city's hospitals. The man who had built empires from nothing. Emma blinked, trying to reconcile the fragile stranger from last night with the powerful figure in front of her. He smiled faintly. "I collapsed after a board meeting. I wanted fresh air. I didn't expect to wake up in an ambulance." His eyes held hers. "But I do remember someone refusing to leave my side." The room was silent. "I was told you missed your clinical shift because of me," he continued. Emma lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry if that caused trouble." A soft chuckle escaped him. "Miss Collins, compassion is never trouble. It is the foundation of medicine." He turned to the dean. "I'd like to personally cover her tuition for the remainder of her education." And I'd also like to offer her a mentorship position within my medical outreach foundation. Gasps filled the office. Emma's mind struggled to catch up. Tuition, paid. A mentorship, with a global CEO. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from the overwhelming realization that one quiet act of kindness had echoed further than she could have imagined. Mr. Blake looked back at her gently. Last night, you didn't see a CEO. You saw a patient. And that's exactly the kind of nurse this world needs. Emma felt something shift inside her, not pride, not triumph, but purpose. She hadn't acted for reward. She had acted because someone needed her. And somehow, that had changed both their lives. As she left the office that day, whispers followed her down the hall, but she walked differently now. Still humble. Still kind. But stronger. Because she understood something powerful, the smallest moments define us the loudest. And sometimes, when you choose compassion over convenience, the world answers in ways you never expect. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness still matters, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that prove one simple act can change everything.